Welcome to lesson 7.16. Today we're looking at the US customary scale and functions table. So the custom scale sounds like a big scary word, but really what we're talking about is just units of weight, length, and volume or measuring fluids. And so this is kind of a review, but we want to make sure we understand these concepts as we look at these different things. So first of all, we have units of weight. As we look at units of weight, we know that 16 ounces equals 1 pound. We also know that 2,000 pounds equals 1 ton. All right, with that information in mind, right, we can try and solve a problem like this. It says, suppose a pickup truck can carry a load of half of a ton. How many pounds can the pickup truck carry? All right, so we break this down, half a ton, but then we want to convert it all to pounds in the end. So as we look at this, all right, we're going to use our relationship we see here with 1 ton equals 1,000 pounds. So if 1 ton equals 1,000 pounds, then how much does half of a ton work? It would be half of this. So we're going to take 2,000 and divide it by 5, which is how you would take something in half. Not 5. What am I saying? Times 1/2, right? Divided by 2. That's what I'm. We should just start this video over. All right, and get 1,000. All right, we don't even need to do the math. You know how to do it. All right, and you get 1,000 pounds. Too easy. Bad explanation. Moving on. Okay, so that's our weight using the US customary. Then we have length. Inches equals a foot. 3 feet equals a yard. So many yards equal a mile. And so many feet equal a mile also. So we have those different relationships that we want to understand. And from there it says 1 yard is equal to how many inches, right? So we got to take a couple different steps here. We need to understand that 1 yard equals 3 feet, and that in 1 foot there are 12 inches. And so in the end we're going to multiply 3 times 12 to get our total number of inches of 36. Finally, we have units of liquid measures. So ounces, cups, pints, quarts, gallons. We've worked with these ideas before. Make sure you have this stuff in your notes. And an example working with this is the fact that Steve drinks 8 cups of water every day. How many quarts of water does he drink a day? And so we have this understanding. So eventually we're going to convert. We're going to see, okay, we got 2 cups, right, equals a pint. We know that 2 pints equals 1 quart. So if we have 2 cups equals 1 pint, right, so we can divide that in half. Suddenly we have 4 pints, right, and since 4 pints, 2 pints equals 1 quart, divide that in half, would give us 2 quarts. Right? All right, I didn't show all my work on that one, and so if you want to take the steps, you can see how I converted. Right, cups, first of all, to pints, and then pints to quarts as we use those measurements. Okay, we're not going to spend too much time in temperature. You know how to read a temperature scale, but here are some interesting, important facts that the book kind of is going to ask you about, and these are temperatures you really should kind of just commit to memory, right? Knowing that water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. Your normal body temperature is 98.6 degrees. Typical room temperature is about 68 degrees Fahrenheit, and water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Right? And it gives you those numbers because it's going to ask you questions like, okay, if your normal body temperature was 98.6 degrees, and suddenly, you froze to death, what's the difference? How much did your temperature change? I know that's a pretty morbid picture I just gave you. Sorry about that. Hopefully you won't ever freeze to death. But they're going to give you questions comparing different numbers and different temperatures and working with that scale. All right. Then the new thing for today is all about what are called function tables. And as strange as functions or as new as they may seem, there's things you have worked with before. Sometimes we call them T-tables, different things like that. Really, it's the basics of how sequences work, different things like that. Function. The actual definition is the mathematical rule that describes the relationship between two sets of numbers. All right. So we have this function. And so with function tables, we have what is called our input and we have what's called our output. So if I put a 1 in, it says I get a 4 out. If I put a 2 in, I get an 8 out. If I put a 3 in, I get a 12 out. Just like that. And from there, by looking and comparing and describing that relationship, we can come away with what's known as a rule. And so, for example, X usually stands for our input and Y for our output. And so I know that when I put 1 in, I got 4 out. So what would make sense is that I took 4 times 1, which equals 4. When I put 2 in, I got 8 out, which once again follows that pattern, and so forth. And so this rule describes how I was able to get these different numbers. Okay. And so that's the basics of a function table. All right, you're going to take a minute and practice with this function table looking with this sample problem. It says Hannah bought 4 yards of fabric to make a costume for a school play. It says make a function table that shows the number of feet output for a given number of yards input. Use the function table to find the number of feet of fabric Hannah bought. Right? So basically you're figuring out those 4 yards. But first, set up your input output table. Right? And if you want a little extra credit, tell me what the rule is. All right. What's the rule of this function table? All right, that's it for lesson 16.